Good morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock here in London. You're very welcome to join us for the breakfast show here on Sky News Monday morning. Full coverage of the Israel-Hamas war here on the breakfast show. We'll speak to Palestinians and Israelis, including the spokesperson for the Israel Defense Force. It's Monday, the 9th of October.
Yes, morning, Kay. We're live in Jerusalem as the war between Israel and Hamas enters its third day. Lighting up the night sky, Israel launches fresh airstrikes on Gaza overnight. In an exchange of fire, more than 400 Palestinians have been killed so far. Sky News reports from the heart of Israeli destruction, with up to 700 killed in Hamas attacks and 260 bodies recovered from a music festival.
Well, there's jets in the air, that's the sound of the Iron Dome, the Israeli defense system.
Hostage fears, we report on the fate of those missing in Israel and feared captured by Hamas fighters.
Thanks, Mark. Also coming up on the programme for you this morning, all smiles in Liverpool as the Shadow Chancellor prepares to reveal her plans for the UK economy at the Labour Party conference. We'll speak to her live. Whitehall walkout. Cleaners, security guards and support staff at 3 departments go on strike today. Schools shut and passengers stranded as a typhoon causes flooding and heavy rain in Hong Kong. And flooding too in Scotland, causing rail and road chaos. Morning, everybody. A busy show to bring you today and all the day's top stories to bring you very shortly. First, our main story and 2 developments on the Israel-Hamas war. Mark standing by for us in Jerusalem this morning, as you saw. Hi, Mark. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Kay, from Jerusalem. And the fighting has continued overnight on what is now dawn of day 3 of the Israeli-Hamas war. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to turn much of Gaza into rubble in revenge for what he described as the Black Day of Hamas attacks on Saturday. These are the key developments this morning. Overnight, Israel has intensified its bombardment of the Gaza Strip, where the Gazan Health Ministry says more than 400 people have been killed. At least 700 people have been reportedly killed inside Israel, and about 260 bodies have been removed from a music festival targeted by Hamas in the south of the country. This morning, an Israeli military spokesperson has said their forces are still fighting Hamas gunmen in 7 to 8 places in southern Israel. And last night, the US said it would send warships and fighter jets to support Israel. Well, these are the latest pictures that we're getting as Israel continues to hit the Gaza Strip with retaliatory airstrikes overnight. The Gazan Health Ministry says 78 children are among 400 killed in the territory so far. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees said a school sheltering more than 225 people took a direct hit. The UN says more than 123,000 people in Gaza have been displaced so far. Some rockets were also fired towards Israel from Gaza overnight. Well, I'm joined here in Jerusalem by our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. And Alistair, bring us up to date then with developments overnight. Extraordinary that Hamas gunmen still inside southern Israel.
Yeah, and not just that. Yes, they are in southern Israel, as you said in that introduction, 7 to 8 places where the fighting is going on. One of the reasons for that, and the fact that the Israelis have not yet got control of it, is because a lot of this is going on in civilian areas, villages and towns. And so the Israelis are using their special forces to go pretty carefully, although robustly, in order to try and clear them without any further loss of civilian life.
And the sights and sounds we're hearing are the retaliatory airstrikes.
More than 1,100 airstrikes now on Gaza. targeting, as the Israelis say, Hamas infrastructure, Hamas leadership, Hamas command posts. But as we've heard and seen from our teams in Gaza, civilians also caught up in this. And one other extraordinary element to all of this is that whilst the Israelis have managed to resecure most of the, I think it was about 29 infiltration points where Hamas came through on Saturday morning, some are still open and Hamas fighters are still getting into Israel.
Okay, Alistair, thank you very much indeed. So we're hearing that Israeli forces are fighting Hamas gunmen at 7 or 8 locations then outside of Gaza. That's according to the Israeli military this morning. Our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, reports from the southern city of Sderot, and a warning that his report includes images of the body bags containing victims and the bloodied aftermath of one attack.
Murdered in cold blood on a sunny Saturday morning, the bodies of some of the victims of the Hamas attack have yet to be removed. The blood-splattered cars where they were killed are parked a few feet away. The vehicles pockmarked and broken by the hail of bullets. This was a coordinated attack on the town of Sderot. The road leading to it is lined with vehicles attacked by Hamas as they drove towards the city in this surprise attack. Some escaped on foot, but many were killed or taken hostage and driven to Gaza. Survivors like Isaac hid in their homes, praying the gunmen wouldn't find them. It was simply terrifying, they say.
I was shocked. I heard shooting and couldn't believe it. 6 in the morning on Saturday, on the holiday. It was very scary.
The main police station is destroyed, taken over by the gunmen who killed 20 officers. The scale of what happened here is clearly unfathomable for the people of Israel. Nobody ever thought this was remotely possible. In the end, the defense forces destroyed the station. In many ways, it's a symbol of a security system that simply failed.
Even when we as the IDF, one person is killed, we take it as a personal loss and a personal responsibility. Here, where hundreds of people have been killed, we will do the most thorough analysis ever done. We'll learn our lessons. We'll make sure that never happens again. But that's going to be for tomorrow. Today, we have to do everything to protect our civilians, restore peace to the people of Israel, and make sure that Hamas never has the capability again to do this kind of carnage to the people of Israel.
The roads heading to southern Israel are eerily quiet. The country is scared and has been scarred by this attack. Security is now everywhere. The only cars in any significant numbers are heading north. On board families moving away from the Gaza borderline with anything they can squeeze in. At a petrol station, we came across SWAT teams. They're here to retrieve hostages taken by Hamas and still inside Israel. Amongst them are negotiators. But this is an ongoing war, and you're never far from it.
Well, as jets in the air, that's the sound of the Iron Dome, the Israeli defense system. Soldiers putting on their helmets. You're never quite sure what's happening at any given time out here. The dome is protecting Israel, but it's still unnerving. Say the jets are above us as well, so it's very much an active battlefield in many ways. And the police and the SWAT teams are here because further along the road are where it's believed hostages are still being held.
The defense forces are still securing the Gaza border, but there is already a huge build-up of soldiers and hardware. An Israeli incursion is coming, and it will be bloody. The government is in no mood for mercy, and that will inevitably cost the lives of civilians. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Southern Israel.
Let's speak then to our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who's also down there in southern Israel. And, well, Dominic, this is extraordinary. The Israelis wouldn't have expected this 48 hours on, and we're told Hamas gunmen are still operating or hiding down there.
Yeah, it is astonishing, Mark, as you say. We had a briefing from the IDF, and what they're saying is that we thought this morning we would be in a better place, and they're not. And they're being pretty frank about that. They say, as you say, that there is fighting still going on between what they call their warriors and the Hamas terrorists, as they call them, in 7 or 8 places dotted around the Israeli communities to the east and north of the Gaza border. They won't be drawn on exactly why that's still going on. They say they're operating surgically. It's complicated by the fact they're operating in civilian areas, and possibly Hamas is holding hostages as well. But clearly their enemy is more capable than had been previously thought. So that's still going on. What's also astonishing, as Ali was saying earlier, that they're still not sure whether Hamas can get in and out through tunnels or possibly breaches in the fence. But also yesterday, reports that they landed, or claims by Hamas, they landed on the sea, the coast here between Ashdod and Ashkelon. And then in Ashkelon, where we are now, they were able to operate in cars, shooting at Israeli motorists. They were involved in a gunfight with Israeli soldiers, and 15 Israelis were killed in that. So it is a very febrile situation here. It's ongoing. And what the Israelis say is this is a very different situation to what they've had in the past. In scope and scale, this is a very different conflict, and that we should expect a long and hard conflict in Gaza itself. They say this is full-on war, and they can't respect all the norms that they've operated on in the past. They're not necessarily going to warn Palestinians. They'll do as much as they can. But when they strike targets in Gaza, they won't be able to do as much as they have in the past, they say, to avoid collateral damage. So I think the gloves are off. It is a very different conflict to anything we've seen here, Mark, in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Dominic, thank you very much indeed. And on top of all this, more than 100 people have, of course, been taken hostage by Hamas. That's according to a senior official of the militant group. And more people remain missing. These are the faces of just some of those. Their families have posted their pictures on social media, desperately seeking information. Their shared fear is that they are dead, or, as is becoming increasingly clear, they may have been taken hostage by Hamas. Among them is Noa Argamani, 25 years old. She was among hundreds of people dancing the night away at a music festival just hours before the Hamas attack. And this is the moment when Noa is kidnapped, manhandled on a motorbike and driven across the desert. A friend of Noa has confirmed to Sky News that it is her on this bike, arms outstretched. She is begging her captors not to kill her. Just awful scenes. And later a video was released appearing to show her sat on her own, drinking some water. We don't know exactly where, of course, but her father spoke to the media.
What can I say? All my life, since she was born, I tried to protect her and hug her and support her and love her. And here, at this difficult moment, at least cheer her up. I couldn't offer her a hand.
Well, the British national, Jake Marlowe, was working at the festival as a security guard.
We haven't heard from him since about early morning yesterday. What I understand is that there were rockets that fired over that party, and they were in attempts to try and evacuate party-goers from the venue.
And by the way, we'll be bringing you a special programme, Israel-Hamas War, live from Jerusalem. That's at 9 o'clock this evening, UK time, here on Sky News. For now, from Jerusalem, let's go back to Kay in Westminster for the day's other news. Kay.
Mark, thank you. Day 2 of the Labour Party conference in Liverpool today, which will be focusing on reviving the economy. The Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has branded the Tories as the single biggest obstacle to the economy. Let's find out more, should we? Mari's standing by for us this morning. There you are, Mari. Hi, good morning to you. So what are we going to hear from Rachel Reeves?
Morning, Kay. Well, Rachel Reeves today is giving that all-important speech as Shadow Chancellor at midday. It is her pitch to the country to show that the Labour Party can be trusted with the UK's finances and with the government economies, but also what's really important is this is a chance really for the Labour Party in general to try and win over what we call floating voters. Floating voters are those voters who haven't maybe quite decided they can move from one party to the other. The Labour Party needs to find a way to win floating voters and persuade them to move to Labour or move back to Labour in some parts of the Red Wall, for instance. So Rachel Reeves today is going to say in her speech that they are going to reform planning laws. They're going to focus on making sure that critical national infrastructure is accelerated when it comes to those building projects. So talking about updating all national policy statements, prioritising growth in the economy, specifically battery factories, laboratories and 5G infrastructure, ensuring that local communities get something back, so incentivising local communities. For instance, they could get cheaper energy bills if they allow energy programmes to be happening near them in their communities. They also say they want clearer national guidance for developers and that they are going to actually fund 300 new planning officers raised by a surcharge on stamp duty for foreign buyers as well. So they're trying to create a pitch of hope and optimism for the future under the Labour government. Obviously, as you've been seeing from your reports across Gaza and Israel, that might be overshadowed by what's going on internationally.
OK. Mari Fanai, thanks. Speaking to the Shadow Chancellor, that's Rachel Reeves, of course. That's coming up around about 8:20 this morning. And Ms Reeves will be giving her speech at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool from midday today. Of course, covering that for you live here on Sky. Meantime, what's happening in Whitehall today? Let's get more with Ivor, should we? Another strike.
Another strike, yeah, and that is by cleaners, security guards and support staff at 3 government departments. They are the departments for energy security, the department for business and trade and the department for science, innovation and technology. And this is the second time in 2 months this group of workers from the PCS union have walked out. It's all about pay, as with all these other industrial disputes. They say they've been offered a pay rise of 2.2% by their employer, which is a big facilities management firm called ISS. Their union says that's nowhere near enough. It's way below inflation. And they're calling on the ISS to come back to the negotiating table separately today, though. So whilst they're going to be walking out all week, security guards who work at the House of Commons, they're going to be balloted on whether or not to strike. And if they do decide to, that could mean restricted access to Parliament and long queues for all of those who work inside, including, of course, MPs. So it means these ongoing industrial disputes are getting closer and closer to the heart of government.
OK, for now, Ivor, thanks very much indeed. Taking you back to Liverpool very shortly indeed, and of course also to Jerusalem for the very latest on the Israel-Hamas war. Before that, though, other stories making the headlines for you on the programme this morning. Monday morning, schools have shut and flights have been grounded in Hong Kong as the remnants of Typhoon Koinu brought heavy rain and strong winds. The storm left hundreds of passengers stranded at the airport and underground metro stations overnight. The typhoon has weakened into a severe tropical storm, but many areas were still inundated with water just a month after the city was hit with record-breaking rainfall. And also floods brought havoc in Scotland over the weekend, causing disruption to both road and rail networks. Parts of the country saw 1 month's rain in 24 hours and severe flooded warnings, including risk to life, which remain in place in some areas. The flooding has been compared to the infamous Beast from the East storm, while other parts of the UK enjoyed the warmest start to October for 5 years. Metrobank has agreed to a rescue deal with investors to shore up its finances. The deal includes £325 million in capital, as well as the refinancing of £600 million of debt. The bank is also in discussion to sell up to £3 billion of residential mortgages. More than 420,000 jobs in the retail industry have been lost since 2010, sparking fears the high street may be in terminal decline, according to a new report. The GMB union said its research suggested a 28% decline in traditional retail jobs over the last decade. The report follows the recent closure of Wilko stores, leading to the loss of thousands of jobs. More than 2,400 people have died in an earthquake in western Afghanistan, according to the country's ruling Taliban. The magnitude 6.3 quake struck at lunchtime on Saturday, followed by a series of strong aftershocks. Hundreds are still feared to be trapped in rubble as rescue workers and survivors dig around the clock to reach them.
This earthquake was a very terrible event that happened in several of our villages, and we had many injured and killed. The intensity was also strong. 2 or 3 people were killed from each family.
More than 400 criminals, including senior kingpins in organised crime, have been sent to prison following a Metropolitan Police operation. They've been jailed for a total of 3,722 years behind bars. Operation Eternal targeted EncroChat, goodness, an encrypted messaging platform, and used the data to identify criminals, solve murders and tackle the drug trade. And the US Powerball lottery jackpot has climbed to a staggering £1.27 billion after another draw in which nobody matched the game's 6 numbers and won the prize. The figure is now the world's 4th largest lottery after rolling over for 34 consecutive draws. The last time someone won was on the 19th of July. They do have to pay tax on that, though, so you do have to bear that in mind, I suppose. Let's get the latest on what's happening with the government this morning. Joining us, excuse me, oh my goodness, I've got that conference cold. Was it you guys that gave it to me? I think it might have been. Yeah, fully over the weekend. Lee Rowley, of course, local government minister. Hi, it's good to see you.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us on the programme. What is the latest as far as the British government is concerned with Israel and Hamas?
It's shocking events over the weekend, and it's absolutely outrageous what has happened. The Prime Minister yesterday gave his full and unequivocal support to Israel. Israel has an absolute right to defend itself. There's going to be difficult days ahead in the Middle East, but Israel will have the right to defend itself, and the UK government will support them in doing that.
What are we going to do about the Brits that are stuck out there?
Well, the Foreign Office is, as it always does when there are challenges around the world, it's working very hard to make sure it knows where British nationals are, to provide support, to provide the support that is necessary, and also, whether it's in Israel, Gaza or whatever it is, encouraging people not to travel where it's not necessary, but also supporting where it's needed.
I totally get that, Mr. Rowley, but do we know where the Brits are?
Well, there are many, many people who go in and out of Israel every single day. I think the Foreign Office is trying to focus on where it is necessary, where their support is needed. Obviously, there is this significant challenge at the moment with people from Israel who may be have been taken into Gaza. Foreign Office and the Foreign Secretary is working very hard on ensuring that we are clear about what's happening.
And should Brits travel to Israel at the moment?
Well, the Foreign Office will make any announcements that's appropriate.
At the moment, they still
warded.
Should.
Yeah, I think, as I understand it, it is still okay to travel to Israel. We've advised against travelling to elsewhere, such as Gaza and the like. But it really is for the Foreign Secretary, who has got a full understanding of all this situation, who will make announcements.
Hopefully he'll update us soon. Tell me what the government's doing to sort out or challenge or get into sharper focus any anti-Semitic attacks, whatever form they might be, here in the UK.
Anti-Semitism is absolutely unacceptable. The government's been very clear about that, and we've brought in laws over many years in order to do that. We've seen some isolated incidents over the past few days. The Met Police have said that they are stepping up patrols. There is clear rules about what can be done where protest transgresses into things which are unacceptable, and I know that police around the country will do what is necessary should that be the case.
But a Palestinian flag fluttering from the back of a car, is that too much?
As I understand it, there are some things which absolutely can't happen. You cannot support prescribed organisations like Hamas within the United Kingdom, and if that's the case, then I would expect the police to take action accordingly. There is a right to protest. We have to respect the right to protest. I have no idea.
Does that include the flags?
I have no idea why people.
In your opinion?
I have no idea why people would do that. We have just seen a clear terrorist attack on Israeli soil. You know, they're describing it as the equivalent of their 9/11. I would encourage people not to go out and to protest in the way that they can. But ultimately, there is a right to protest, but there is not a right. There is absolutely not a right to glorify terrorism, and I expect the police to come down on that where that occurs, if it occurs.
I understand that, and of course, you know, we have to hold our noses if sometimes people feel that it's appropriate to flutter flags and shout abuse from a vehicle. But what about if these are, you know, kids who are just being over-exuberant for whatever reason? Should they still be arrested?
There's no over-exuberance in glorifying terrorism, and so people should be very clear what the law is. People shouldn't break the law, and people should also have the decency to recognise that over 1,000 people have died over the weekend in a completely unprovoked attack.
No, I understand that.
And I would be very cautious about what people are doing.
But I would put it to you that another way of looking at that potentially is offering support to those who are in Gaza that are being bombarded at the moment.
Well, Israel has just seen a large number of people come over a sovereign border, kill indiscriminately some of their citizens. 240 people, as I understand it, who've died, who are at a festival. And I think that it is incumbent upon us all to recognise that Israel has a right to defend itself, has a right to resolve the issues which are going on. And what happens on the streets of the UK is that people should be extremely cautious and should know exactly where the law is, and they cannot
Absolutely, Minister, but all
done.
civilians have the right to live in peace. And I'm saying to you, if people here in the United Kingdom are flying a flag in order to offer support for civilians in Gaza, is that something that this government would be opposed to?
There's absolutely no way that we can ever get to peace in the Middle East, which we all want to see and have wanted to see for many decades, through the kind of things which happened over the weekend. And therefore, I think in terms of choices that people are making in the United Kingdom right now, I would suggest they be extremely cautious about those choices which they make.
So the demonstration outside the Israeli embassy later on by Palestinian supporters should not go ahead?
As I've said, there is laws. People know when they transgress those laws. They know what they're not able to do. And I would expect everybody else to show caution.
No, I don't necessarily think that that's completely what you were saying. You were saying that they shouldn't be offering support for civilians in Gaza, and this demonstration outside the embassy this evening is exactly what they will want to be doing.
OK, as I've said, there is a right to protest in the United Kingdom, and we have to accept that right to protest even when we find it distasteful. But at the same time, there are laws around glorifying terrorism, there are laws around anti-Semitism, and within the United Kingdom, and there's also a relevance about what people should do and how they should consider their actions. But it's ultimately for them to determine within the bounds of the law.
Yeah, but I think it's a reasonable discussion. Let me just ask you one final question on that, and then we'll move on to other topics. And that is, we did see a member of the Labour Party sharing a platform with a Palestinian organisation. Do you think that's reasonable at this time?
I was surprised to see that. The chairman of the Conservative Party, Greg Hands, has written last night to the Labour Party to highlight that and to ask the Labour Party leadership what they are doing about that. We hope to hear from them soon.
But as we know, they've said that it isn't an organisation that is illegal in this country, and as a result, they're not going to take any action. If she was a member of the Conservative Party, would action have been taken, do you think?
Well, thankfully, she's not a member of the Conservative Party. I mean, ultimately, it is for people to determine how they want to conduct themselves, but for members of Parliament particularly to think about the messages and the signals that they're sending out. I think what Osama Begum did yesterday, or on Saturday, was not necessarily an appropriate thing to do, and we've highlighted it.
OK. Talk to me, if you would, please, about regeneration projects, which would undoubtedly involve building more homes. These homes, are they going to be private homes or affordable homes? How are you going to decide, and where are you going to build them?
There'll be a mixture of all. It's about bringing brownfield sites which are more challenging, more difficult, have issues on them, bringing them back into use so that they can across communities across the UK, they can be used to build housing. So we have an old school site in Hull, for example, which hopefully will bring on 99 new homes. And there'll be a range of private homes, social homes, affordable homes in the different sites across the communities as a whole.
Building on Greenbelt?
Well, the intention of the announcement today is to bring brownfield on. It's brownfield first, where there is previously developed land, where we can use that, where it can be used to both redevelop and regenerate and bring on the new housing that we need. We want to do that first. Our preference is not to use Greenbelt. We've been very clear about the fact that we believe that Greenbelt should be protected. And throughout the years, our policy has always been to bring brownfield on first.
OK. Successful conference, Minister, do you think?
I think it was clearly setting out the willingness of the Prime Minister to make difficult decisions. We're in a challenging time, both nationally and across the world as a whole. And what Rishi was showing last week was his willingness to take decisions which may be more difficult, may not be popular in some circumstances, but that's the kind of leader I want in the coming years.
OK, let's see what happens. It's good to see you, Minister. Thanks very much, Sinead, for joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next couple of days will be mostly very warm and Scotland will turn mainly dry for a time, but there'll be more rain there tomorrow. Mostly mild now, but it's rather murky for much of the north and near coasts in the west, while central Britain has some patchy rain. There's some inland fog in the south as well.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up for everybody, live in Jerusalem actually with the latest on the escalating conflict between Israel and Hamas. That to come.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent. From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
The 5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Let's talk about what's happening with the Israel-Hamas war. So Simon Mail, former Deputy Chief of Defence Staff, of course. Hi, it's good to see you.
Morning, Kay.
Once the dust settles, one of the things that struck me over the weekend, how on earth could the Israeli Defence Force and Israeli security not have known this was coming?
It's a real shock. The Israelis are known, given their security concerns, for a huge amount of investment in intelligence, and we know that Hamas, Gaza are full of Israeli informers, and the capacity of Hamas to launch such a large, widespread terrorist assault on Israel has come as a shock to everybody. And of course, the failure has huge consequences, obviously, at every level for the region globally, let alone, obviously, for the Israeli citizens and now the citizens of Gaza Strip. So it is a massive intelligence failure, and it will be examined, on the scale of Pearl Harbor, 9/11, and many other intelligence failures.
And Israeli prime ministers do not survive security failures like this.
No, and Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, one of his, the key elements of his so-called appeal to Israeli citizens in elections is exactly on the security side, that he is a very hard-line, robust defender of Israel. So again, this is a personal political failure as well as one of a military and intelligence failure. And inevitably, because of the consequences, there will be a very hard-line response from the IDF and Israel, partly in compensation for that intelligence failure.
You say that, Sir Simon, but we're hearing from our Dominic Maghorn this morning, who says the IDF have admitted that there are still pockets of strong resistance.
Yeah, indeed. And if you've only got to look almost at any conflict, once you can get committed fighters, terrorists in this case, inside a building who are determined to fight to the last bullet, it is extremely difficult to get people out. It requires any fighting in built-up areas is an absolute nightmare for a conventional army. And so if there are pockets, it will take time. And of course, from an Israeli perspective, it'll be a sort of hallmark of IDF failure at the moment, both to have prevented this, deterred it, and then to have dealt with it, because it will roll on for a while.
I know you're going to stay with us throughout the morning, Sir Simon Fenai. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Considered view of the politics here in London. Let's take you to Jerusalem, though. Mark is standing by for us for the very latest on the ground. Mark, good morning.
Yeah, Kay, good morning. Thank you very much indeed. With me now is the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, Fleur Hassan Nahum. Thank you very much for being with us. And, we've just been hearing that Hamas gunmen are still active in southern Israel, 48 hours on. I mean, this is extraordinary.
It beggars belief. I don't understand. I don't think anybody in Israel understands. We're all still in shock how this could possibly happen, and how 48 hours after, there's still 40 terrorists running around southern Gaza with the army, in hot pursuit. We don't really understand the scope of what's happened, and really the terrible massacre that's occurred in the last 48 hours.
I mean, do you consider this a security failure? Well, it is a security failure by the Israeli Defence Force.
We have a border. We left Gaza in 2005. It's actually a real border. We have the best technology in the world. We have a very strong army. We know how to secure our borders. Nobody understands what happened. And I think that after this whole nightmare is over, there will definitely be investigations to understand what exactly happened here.
Right, you are Deputy Mayor of this city. How worried are you about violence spreading here?
So we are a little worried, because the last thing we need is more fronts to deal with. There was threatening noises coming from the north, as you know. And here we know that there are some small Hamas sleeper cells waiting to attack. We've had a couple of scuffles over the last few days, but by and large, there's a big police presence, and we've kept things calm.
What do you mean, a couple of scuffles? Have there been contacts between the security forces and Hamas gunmen in Jerusalem?
Well, we don't know if they're Hamas or if they're another Islamist group, but there have been some hooligans trying to take advantage of the situation, and we've promptly calmed the situation down.
Now, there are those who say that while Hamas is in control in Gaza, and while you have this right-wing government in power here, that there's no chance of anything other than violence.
But what was the excuse all these years? What was the excuse when there were left-wing governments? This kind of right-wing government excuse is growing a little thin, because Hamas's charter says they want to destroy the state of Israel. Hamas's charter is anti-Semitic.
But it's been the most violent. It's been the most violent year.
It has.
2023 for 2 decades.
It has. I'm not quite sure if it's got anything to do with whatever government's in power. I think there's a bigger picture that we need to kind of zoom out and look at what's going on in Iran and look at what's going on with Israel normalizing with Saudi Arabia. Why is it happening now? Isn't it a coincidence that we've got this kind of roadmap to normalization with Saudi Arabia? Which is the one country that doesn't want that? Iran. And so I don't think any of this is a coincidence. I think there are some big puppet masters involved, and I don't think we should minimize the bigger regional picture.
No, absolutely. That is true. But there are those who are clear, and they're saying that Palestinian grievances are fueling all this, and that this government has done very little to address the grievances, legitimate grievances, many would say, of the Palestinians.
Absolutely. In the last 3 months, this government has given unprecedented work permits to Gaza residents to come into Israel to work. Why do they need to come into Israel to work? Because there's no economy. Why is there a blockade? They also have a border with Egypt. Why doesn't anybody talk about that? The Egyptians block them more than Israel does. Israel brings in humanitarian aid. Israel brings in children for medical care. Israel gives work permits for Gazans to come in and work in Israel. We're doing way more than the Egyptians, and nobody talks about them blockading the Gazans.
Deputy Mayor, thank you very much indeed. And we're going to hear from the delegate, the Palestinian delegate to the UN shortly. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Indeed. Well, after a closed-door emergency meeting, the UN Security Council opted for no immediate action over the growing conflict, despite the US demanding all members strongly condemn what it described as the heinous terrorist attacks committed by Hamas. Meanwhile, the Palestinian ambassador, as I was saying, to the UN has called for international protection against Israeli strikes that have killed Palestinian civilians.
We are not subhumans. Let me repeat, we are not subhumans. We will never accept a rhetoric that denigrates our humanity and reneges our rights. A rhetoric that ignores the occupation of our land and oppression of our people.
Well, joining us for more on all this now is our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, who is in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. And Alex, we've just been talking here to the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, who was very keen to talk about the regional dimensions to all this, and all eyes will be on Lebanon and what Hezbollah choose to do next.
Yeah, I mean, since the summer war mark of 2006, this border with Israel has been relatively quiet. I think it can be, if you want to look at the framework of it, it's something like mutual deterrence. Both sides know that they can cause enormous damage, as they did in 2006, to each other. Now, there have been skirmishes on the border, but they have been within the parameters of what you could call the rules of engagement. Each side knows what kind of provocations they can get away with. Now, yesterday we saw one of those. Hezbollah fired at an Israeli radar station with what it says were guided missiles and artillery. It appeared to have hit that station, and Israel retaliated by hitting what it described as the terrorist infrastructure of Hezbollah. But if you look at that as an example, it was in a contested area. Although it did hit something, it wasn't fired into Israel at cities, for instance, which would have been a dramatic escalation, bringing things out of the rules of engagement. So perhaps the way to interpret it is as a warning shot from Hezbollah, a sign of symbolic resistance, a sign of solidarity with Hamas. But Hezbollah is saying that its rockets and its missiles are with Hamas. It has warned if there is a serious ground incursion, and it's hard to think that there won't be one, it will get involved in this conflict. So the dynamic for a regional war is very, very real indeed, and also very worrying.
Yep, OK, Alex, thank you very much indeed. And with all that in mind, the US is sending a carrier strike group to the eastern Mediterranean as part of its pledge to support Israel. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has the latest details on all that from Washington.
Yes, a significant announcement from here at the White House. A U.S. aircraft carrier with a strike group of 5 warships is now on its way through the Mediterranean to sit in the waters off Israel. And President Biden has also approved the deployment of fighter jets to supplement its existing capability in the region. And the Defense Secretary has said these steps are to strengthen America's posture in the region to bolster regional deterrence efforts. It is clearly a show of force, but it reflects too just how serious the weekend developments are and how quickly this could all spiral regionally. And honestly, the mood among diplomats I've spoken to this weekend across the region is grim. The shock for Israel is so massive that its government will feel compelled to mount a massive retaliation. It's a dangerous moment on so many fronts. Gaza, of course, but Lebanon, Hezbollah, Syria and the Iran proxies there, and then of course Iran itself. Israel ultimately blames Iran, its regional influence and its desire to seek the destruction of Israel for the weekend of bloodshed. The US Naval Task Force is unlikely to operate offensively unless directly threatened, but it's there because President Biden knows how this could spiral. America is also providing a resupply of weapons to Israel's army for the expected operation in Gaza. And on that, add just another piece to the geopolitical jigsaw, because if America is funding a war in Gaza, that will impact the weapons it has available for Ukraine. A weekend with implications far and wide.
Mark Stone there. And Kay, it is a fast-moving and grim story developing here.
Indeed so, Mark. Please keep safe. Thank you. Still to come on the programme for you this morning, Monday morning breakfast show here on Sky News, as cleaners, security guards and support staff walk out of 3 Whitehall departments. We'll speak to Public and Commercial Service Union's national president about why.
My grandfather, Frank Murphy, he was in the 100th Bomb Group, part of the 8th Air Force during World War II, and he flew 21 missions over Nazi-occupied Europe. And actually on Tuesday is the 80th anniversary of when he was shot down over Munster. And he was a prisoner of war for 18 months in Stalag Luft III, where the Great Escape took place. And in the 1990s, he decided, he was from Atlanta, Georgia, and after retirement, he had worked for Lockheed Martin, and he worked with airplanes his entire life and was in Saudi Arabia and all these. He had this very interesting life he also writes about in the book. But he decided to take pen to paper and write this for the family, for his 7 grandchildren, for his 4 children. And he wrote this book in retirement, never expecting it to be published on a wide scale. It's been like over a decade in the making, this TV series. What they did see was Don Miller. He's a famous historian, his book, Masters of the Air. And so they optioned Masters of the Air, and Don knew my grandfather, and he interviewed my grandfather for his book. And so my grandfather, Frank Murphy, was mentioned in Masters of the Air, and Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg decided that they wanted to tell the stories of the 100th Bomb Group, known as the Bloody 100th. And so my grandfather was a navigator in the 100th, and so they feature these guys, and Austin Butler's in the series, and Rafferty Law, Jude Law's son, and all of these incredible actors. These were just boys. They were barely 18, 19 years old, and here they are with no flying experience, going up in these unpressurized, massive bombers. My grandfather flew 21 missions. He almost made it to 25, and on that 21st mission, he gets shot down over Munster, Germany. He has this incredible story in the book about how he's parachuting out of his aircraft that's on fire, and he had been injured in the shoulder, and 2 of the men on his aircraft died that day. So it goes back to the title of Luck of the Draw. He says in the book, you either had your name on a bullet or you didn't, and it simply came down to luck.
Hello again, everybody. You're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News Monday morning. Labour Party conference, of course, waiting to hear from Rachel Reeves in the next hour. Before that, though, cleaners, security guards and support staff in 3 Whitehall departments starting a 5-day strike today. Members of the PCS union are walking out in a pay dispute. Let's go up to Liverpool, should we, and bring in Fran Heathcote. She is the national president, joining us from party conference. Hi, Fran, good to see you. What's the strike about?
Hiya. Well, our members provide cooking, cleaning and security services to some of the richest businessmen in the world, and at the same time they're employed by ISS and have a payoff of 2.2% whilst the inflation's running at 6.8%. Clearly, they also work alongside people who are looking at much bigger increases. Many of them are very low-paid members anyway. Many of them work 2 or 3 jobs just to get by. And this is really a dispute to try and get them a reasonable pay increase.
How many people are we talking about?
There aren't loads. It's about 100, just under 100 staff, that most of them union members that are taking this action.
OK, and are they mostly men, women? Does it not differentiate particularly?
It's a mixture. I mean, there are a lot of women that are in these roles traditionally, but more often than not, you know, it's quite a mix. And as I say, they are low-paid workers. They don't do this lightly. It's quite a big deal for them, and they feel very strongly that they deserve to be able to feed their families.
I get that, Fran, but relatively small number from what you're saying. What impact is the strike action actually going to have?
Well, it'll impact in as much as the services that would normally be provided aren't going to be there for, you know, what are quite an important group of workers, you know, high-paid, high-profile business people that visit those Whitehall offices, and so it does have an impact. I think there's a lot of public support for them. They have very lively, vibrant picket lines, but also there's a lot of people that will stop and talk to them about why they're on strike. So reputationally, it's probably not great for ISS to prolong this. Our demands are quite simple. We would like to get into talks with the company to try and resolve this dispute.
And separately, House of Commons security guards also thinking about going on strike. Tell me about that.
Yeah, similar issues. Again, our outsourced workers, so the CS of PCS is the commercial services, people who traditionally might have been civil servants had it not been for their work being outsourced. And the issues are very, very similar. You know, we want these companies to get into talks. Often they bid for these contracts on low wages, low terms and conditions, and we want that put right. And the easiest way to put that right is to talk to us, engage with us, and try and find solutions to these disputes that are cropping up.
OK. We're heading up to Liverpool tomorrow, so hopefully we'll be able to catch up with you and see how that strike is going. Thanks very much indeed for taking the time. Thank you, Fran.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Quick look at the weather for you.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Next couple of days, mostly very warm, and Scotland will turn mainly dry for a time. But there'll be more rain there as well. Mostly mild now, but it's rather murky for much of the north and near coasts in the west, while central Britain has some patchy rain.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Israel's Defence Force have told Sky News they thought they'd be in a better place than they are in the battle against Hamas. At least 700 Israelis have been killed, more than 400 Palestinians killed since Hamas launched attacks on Israel on Saturday morning.
We have just seen a clear terrorist attack on Israeli soil. You know, they're describing it as the equivalent of their 9/11. I would encourage people not to go out and to protest in the way that they can. But ultimately, there is a right to protest, but there is not a right. There is absolutely not a right to glorify terrorism, and I expect the police to come down on that.
If people here in the United Kingdom are flying a flag in order to offer support for civilians in Gaza, is that something that this government would be opposed to?
There's absolutely no way that we can never get to peace in the Middle East, which we all want to see and have wanted to see for many decades, through the kind of things which happened over the weekend. And therefore, I think in terms of choices that people are making in the United Kingdom right now, I would suggest they be extremely cautious about.
Sir Simon still with us, of course, former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff. What is Hamas hoping to gain by this attack? Because once the shock has subsided, Israel will have a mighty fist against Gaza.
And that, of course, is one of the aims of Hamas. They like to create martyrs. And they know Israel will have no option but to retaliate very, very strongly. At a macro level, there's, of course, an attempt to undermine rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Israel, part of the Abraham Accords. On another level, it is acting to an extent their paymasters in Iran. It's a long ideological struggle. They're keen to create martyrs, but that is exactly what they will do. And any idea that they would garner support by largely attacking a rave at the Supernova Rave in Rheims can only damage their reputation, to my mind, and increasing casualties. But they're not interested in that. They are quite happy for Israel to carry out strikes in Gaza.
OK, Sir Simon, I know you're going to stay with us for now. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And still to come, the IDF Israel Defence Force says it thought it would be in a better place than it is in the battle against Hamas. More on that. And also, do you have a mortgage with Metro? We've got some news for you. Do stay tuned. Hello, everybody. It is 8 o'clock Monday morning. You are very welcome to join us on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Full coverage of the Israel-Hamas war here on The Breakfast Show. We'll speak to Palestinians and Israelis, including the spokesperson for the Israel Defense Force. It's Monday, the 9th of October.
Yes, good morning, Kay. Fighting between Hamas and Israeli forces continues outside Gaza this morning. Israel says they thought they would be in a better place. Lighting up the night sky, Israel launches fresh airstrikes on Gaza overnight in an exchange of fire. More than 400 Palestinians have been killed so far. Sky News reports from the heart of the Israeli destruction, with up to 700 killed in Hamas attacks and 260 bodies recovered from a music festival.
Well, there's jets in the air, and that's the sound of the Iron Dome, the Israeli defense system.
Hostage fears, we report on the fate of those missing in Israel and feared captured by Hamas fighters.
Thanks, Mark. Also coming up on the programme for you this morning, all smiles in Liverpool as the Shadow Chancellor prepares to reveal her plans for the UK economy at the Labour Party conference. We'll speak to her live. Whitehall walkout cleaners, security guards and support staff at 3 departments go on strike today. Schools shut and passengers stranded as a typhoon causes flooding and heavy rain in Hong Kong. And flooding too in Scotland, causing rail and road chaos there. Morning, everyone. Also, the very latest on what's happening with Metro Bank. If you've got a mortgage with them, what impact might the latest have on you? The latest on that and what's happening with the oil price. Ian King with us shortly. A very busy show to bring you today. All the day's top stories very shortly indeed. First, our main story, of course, and the developments in the Israel-Hamas war. Mark standing by for us in Jerusalem. Hi, Mark. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Kay, and good morning from Israel. There's fresh fighting this morning between Hamas and Israeli forces outside of Gaza. The Israeli Defense Force has said they thought they would be in a better place by now. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to turn much of Gaza into rubble in revenge for what he described as a black day of Hamas attacks on Saturday. Well, these are the key developments this morning. An Israeli military spokesperson has said that while their forces are fighting Hamas gunmen in 7 to 8 places in southern Israel, they thought they would be in a better place by now. Overnight, Israel has intensified its bombardment of the Gaza Strip, where the Gazan Health Ministry says more than 400 people have been killed there. At least 700 people have been reportedly killed in Israel, and about 260 bodies have been removed from a music festival targeted by Hamas in the south of the country. And last night, the US said it would send warships and also fighter jets to support Israel. Well, these are the latest pictures we're getting as Israel continued to hit the Gaza Strip with retaliatory airstrikes overnight. The Gazan Health Ministry said 78 children are among 400 killed in the territory so far. Now, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees said a school sheltering more than 225 people took a direct hit. The UN says more than 123,000 people in Gaza have been displaced so far. And some rockets were also fired towards Israel from Gaza overnight. Let's speak then to our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who is in southern Israel. And, well, Dominic, I mean, it is astonishing to think that, 48 hours after this Hamas attack began, there are still Hamas gunmen operating in southern Israel.
Mark, it is astonishing, and every Israeli we speak to says they never believed that they would have seen what they've seen in the last 48 hours, and they're very worried about the days ahead. I think what's most astonishing is the fact the IDF says they are still fighting Hamas fighters in, as you were saying, 7 or 8 places around the communities around Gaza, and in some of those situations those Hamas fighters are still holding hostages, so it's a complicated operation taking them on. They also say that Hamas is still able to get out of Gaza either by sea or still by land, possibly through the breaches, the many breaches they made in the security fence, and that poses a threat to the people of these communities around Gaza. And we have seen yesterday a group of Hamas militants possibly got in by sea, hijacked a car, and then went through the streets of Ashkelon here and started shooting people. 15 Israelis killed reportedly before they were then killed in turn by Israeli soldiers. So people in cities like Ashkelon, as you can see, are voting with their feet. The shops are shuttered behind me. It feels like a bit of a ghost town here. We're talking to the man who runs the coffee shop here. He was saying on the first morning the bomb shelters in this town were full, and they are now half full. So a lot of people have left. We filmed one family yesterday whose house had been hit by a rocket, and they were getting out and going to friends in the north of the country. I think what is really compounding the fear as well is what Israelis are seeing on social media. Really harrowing videos, for instance, of Israeli toddlers stuck in cages, apparently, with the sounds of Arab voices laughing about them. Not verified, but absolutely profoundly distressing for Israelis, really touching on that kind of, I guess, years of collective trauma, generations of collective trauma that Jews have experienced over the centuries. Not just that, a lot of videos that are terrifying, distressing, and really angering the Israelis here, who want to see revenge, but know that any operation the Israelis launch in revenge or retaliation for this would be complicated by the fact there are 150, or scores at least, of hostages still being held in Gaza by Hamas.
Dominic, thank you very much. So those are the facts this morning. Fighting still going on in southern Israel. Our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, reports from the city of Sderot, and a warning that his report includes images of the body bags containing victims and the bloodied aftermath of one attack.
Murdered in cold blood on a sunny Saturday morning, the bodies of some of the victims of the Hamas attack have yet to be removed. The blood-splattered cars where they were killed are parked a few feet away. The vehicles pockmarked and broken by the hail of bullets. This was a coordinated attack on the town of Sderot. The road leading to it is lined with vehicles attacked by Hamas as they drove towards the city in this surprise attack. Some escaped on foot, but many were killed or taken hostage and driven to Gaza. Survivors like Isaac hid in their homes, praying the gunmen wouldn't find them. It was simply terrifying, they say.
I was shocked. I heard shooting and couldn't believe it. 6 in the morning on Saturday, on the holiday. It was scary, very scary.
The main police station is destroyed, taken over by the gunmen who killed 20 officers. The scale of what happened here is clearly unfathomable for the people of Israel. Nobody ever thought this was remotely possible. In the end, the defense forces destroyed the station. In many ways, it's a symbol of a security system that simply failed.
Even when we as the IDF, one person is killed, we take it as a personal loss and a personal responsibility. Here, where hundreds of people have been killed, we will do the most thorough analysis ever done. We'll learn our lessons. We'll make sure that never happens again, but that's going to be for tomorrow. Today, we have to do everything to protect our civilians, restore peace to the people of Israel, and make sure that Hamas never has the capability again to do this kind of carnage to the people of Israel.
The roads heading to southern Israel are eerily quiet. The country is scared and has been scarred by this attack. Security is now everywhere. The only cars in any significant numbers are heading north. On board families moving away from the Gaza borderline with anything they can squeeze in. At a petrol station, we came across SWAT teams. They're here to retrieve hostages taken by Hamas and still inside Israel. Amongst them are negotiators. But this is an ongoing war, and you're never far from it.
Well, as jets in the air, that's the sound of the Iron Dome, the Israeli defense system. Soldiers putting on their helmets. You're never quite sure what's happening at any given time out here. The dome is protecting Israel, but it's still unnerving. Say the jets are above us as well, so it's very much an active battlefield in many ways. And the police and the SWAT teams are here because further along the road are where it's believed hostages are still being held.
The defence forces are still securing the Gaza border, but there is already a huge build-up of soldiers and hardware. An Israeli incursion is coming, and it will be bloody. The government is in no mood for mercy, and that will inevitably cost the lives of civilians. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Southern Israel.
And I'll be bringing you this programme tonight, Israel-Hamas War, a special programme live from here in Jerusalem. That's at 9 o'clock tonight, UK time, here on Sky News. And the truth is, Kay, that the casualties and the trauma being suffered on both sides is truly horrific.
It certainly is, Mark. I know you're going to update us further throughout the course of the programme. For now, thanks very much indeed. Let's bring in Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor. Interesting to hear what Labour has to say this morning. Party conference, of course, in Liverpool. Hello to you, Shadow Chancellor. Thank you for joining us. Labour's reaction to what happened over the weekend.
Well, it is appalling, the scenes that we're seeing from Israel. Israel has been attacked by terrorists, has every right to defend itself, to get the hostages back and to protect its citizens. Hamas, by its actions, have set back the cause for peace that so many of us are desperate to see in the Middle East. And this has been a very sad few days for the people of Israel and for all those who want peace.
Hussam Zomlot, Palestinian ambassador to the United Kingdom, said this attack on Israel was coming their way, in his words. Set to appear alongside David Lammy at Labour conference later on, potentially the next Foreign Secretary, should you win the election. Is that still the case?
Look, I'm very upset about those remarks. Israel and the attacks on civilians, the festival goers, the children who have been taken hostage. It is completely unacceptable. And Keir, David, myself, the whole of the Labour Party stand by the people of Israel at this moment.
But should David Lammy, who's potentially the next Foreign Secretary, be appearing on a stage with the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, who says that those that perished in Israel...
I don't know.
Let me just finish the question, if I may, Ms Reeves. There's so many people were murdered, slaughtered in cold blood on Saturday morning. This Palestinian ambassador saying it was coming their way. Is it in any way appropriate that your would-be Foreign Secretary is sharing a stage with him?
I don't know what David's schedule is for conference. I hadn't heard those remarks, but they are totally unacceptable, and we disagree with them entirely.
Would you implore David not to share a stage with him?
Look, I don't know what David's schedule is. I don't know whether this man is at our conference, but David has been very clear and unequivocal about Labour's support for Israel, for the people of Israel, their right to defend themselves, their right to protect civilians, the right to get hostages back. We've been absolutely categorical about that.
What about your own MP, Asbana Begum, pictured posing with Palestinian activists at your party conference on Saturday? Was that appropriate?
I don't think that Labour could be any clearer about our support for the right of Israel to defend itself. You know, if Britain was attacked by terrorists, then everybody would agree that we had the right to defend ourselves against those terrorist attacks. And Israel is no different. Israel has absolutely the right to defend itself against these terrorist attacks, to bring the hostages home and to protect its citizens. And we stand by Israel as they attempt to do just that.
I hear you, but two of your MPs, one of them a very senior MP, is standing foursquare with Palestinian activists.
Okay, that's just not the case. David Lammy has been absolutely categorical about Labour's support for Israel to defend itself. Keir Starmer has as well yesterday been categorical about Labour's support for Israel defending itself at this time of need, and we stand squarely alongside Israel.
Why is the economy safe in your hands?
Well, I'll be setting out Labour's plans today to grow the economy, to make working people better off. But all of this is underpinned by a set of fiscal rules and the iron discipline with which I would enforce them. I'm under no illusions about the scale of the challenge that I would inherit if I had the privilege of becoming Chancellor of the Exchequer next year. That's why I have said that we would get debt down as a share of our national economy. It's why I've said that we would pay for all day-to-day spending through tax receipts, because it is only through that iron discipline that we will get Britain back on a firm footing. But we have to grow the economy. What we've seen these last 13 years is growth on its knees, taxes at the highest level for 70 years, and public services on the floor. And we've got to turn this around. Which is why in my conference speech today, I'll be setting out how we're going to reform the antiquated planning system to get investment here in Britain, to get infrastructure investment going here in Britain. Over the last 2.5 years, I've had the privilege of working with many businesses that have helped inform these plans, because I see huge potential in our country. Businesses and families with huge ambition for themselves, their businesses and their communities, but a government that doesn't match that scale of ambition. That has got to change if we're going to realise our true potential and get the growth, the prosperity and ultimately those improvements in living standards for working people.
How are you going to do that, Ms Reeves, if there's no money?
Well, this is about getting businesses to invest. And what businesses say to me all the time is that we've got money to invest, but we're either choosing not to, or even worse, we're choosing to invest elsewhere, in America, in Asia and other European countries, because they have governments that want to work alongside businesses. They've got planning systems that actually allow shovels to get in the ground, cranes to get in the sky. Last week at the Conservative conference, they cancelled their flagship investment in high-speed rail. This year at our conference, we're going to be setting out our plans to get investment, to get that infrastructure built, because it is by doing that, by unleashing that private sector investment, that we can get that productivity growth and get that economic growth in all parts of our country that we need to improve living standards, but also to get the money to invest in our public services.
OK, and that private sector investment will stretch as far as HS2 being reinstated up to Manchester, will it?
Well, you know, Kay, that I can't make that commitment. The government have blown a hole in the budget, £30 billion over budget, because they lost a grip on it. And I know that the economic inheritance that a Labour government will face is going to be dire. And I'm not going to make any uncosted or unfunded spending commitments. But what I can promise is that I will reform how our planning system works to get that investment, private sector investment, in our energy infrastructure, in 5G infrastructure, in getting batteries built for electric vehicles. We've got so much potential as a country, but we're being held back by 13 years of chaos and uncertainty from the Conservatives, and by a planning system that mitigates against building when we need to see that investment to boost our productivity and get our economy moving again.
Busy day for you. I think your speech is about midday, if I'm not mistaken, Ms Reeves. Thank you for taking... Thank you, that's great. Of course, we'll be covering it live here on Sky News. Thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just receiving some breaking news here on Sky, hearing about Wizz Air, the airline that goes from, Wizz Air will go from Luton, I think, doesn't it? Due to the situation in Israel, they're saying we have cancelled flights to and from Tel Aviv until further notice. So that is Wizz Air. They've obviously been monitoring the situation in Israel after the surprise attack by Hamas on Saturday morning. The death toll already reaching something like 1,100 on both sides of the Israel-Hamas war. And we are hearing that they have cancelled their flights until further notice. That is the latest that we are hearing. I can also tell you that the Israeli military saying the attacks launched by Hamas on Saturday are compared to the 2001 terror attacks on the US. They also say that the military is also still coming across some areas of resistance from Hamas fighters on Israeli territory. We'll get more on that and we will update you, of course. Meantime, that's very much what's happening with the newspapers this morning. Let's start with the Guardian newspaper, should we? This is their front page. The Guardian showing the destruction in Israel from the Hamas attack, death toll exceeding 1,100. Times pictures Nathaniel Young, part of the Israeli Defence Force, killed by Hamas, and missing Brit Jake Marlow. And a quick look at the front of the Express, full-page image of a missile attack saying Rishi's pledge terrorism will not prevail. Mari standing by for us in Liverpool this morning. Hello to you, Mari. What did you make of what we were hearing from the Shadow Chancellor this morning?
Morning, Kay. Well, I think what was really interesting was how strong she was when it came to Labour's stance on supporting Israel and condemning the attacks of Hamas on Israeli civilians. She said it was completely unacceptable. She also condemned the comments of the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, who had said to Sky News yesterday that attacks on Israel from Hamas had been coming. She also said those comments were completely unacceptable. Well, what was interesting, Kay, was she didn't confirm whether David Lammy, Shadow Foreign Secretary, potentially future Foreign Secretary, was still planning on sharing a platform with the Palestinian ambassador to the UK despite those comments, or whether that might be cancelled. She couldn't confirm on that. She couldn't confirm as to whether that would go ahead or be cancelled. And I think it's really all eyes on David Lammy about the plans for that tomorrow. But also, the stakes really couldn't be higher for the Labour Party. After rooting out anti-Semitism under Keir Starmer, the party really need to make sure that they can convince the public that they can be trusted when it comes to not allowing anti-Semitism or any whiff of anti-Semitism to actually come back into the party. And that is a real challenge for the Labour Party. And that is why Rachel Reeves was so strong on her comments on Hamas.
Joining you as well, I think, Ed, I wonder what you thought about what the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Shadow Chancellor, was saying when it came to investment, private investment into infrastructure in the country, but wouldn't say whether that would stretch to HS2.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, the message that we're getting from people behind the scenes here is that, you know, HS2, essentially, if it's been cancelled, it's going to be very difficult to get some of those parts of the route that have been cancelled back. And, you know, that's part of the message that Labour really want to underline, is that they want to be the party of fiscal probity. They want to be a party which isn't making promises that they can't keep. And what's going to be very interesting about this conference, you know, we're going to see Rachel Reeves in her speech later on, is just not just hearing about different policies, and there's going to be policies on the economy, there's going to be policies on housing, on investment, all of these different things, but just seeing the way that it's framed. It's going to be interesting to see who introduces her. I hear there are some kind of high-profile business people from the world of economics who are going to be there. So it's that framing. They want to show that they are the government in waiting. That's the whole point of this conference, really. We are the government in waiting here. But also there's a kind of subtle message as well. Whereas last week, the Conservative Party conference was all about the Conservatives essentially cancelling things. So HS2, you have obviously net zero that's been kind of effectively changed. The government policy has become less ambitious on that. Here, you've got the Labour Party saying what they do want to do, whether that's on housing, whether it's on investment, whether it's on all of the different projects that they want to support. So it's the tone, I think, that really matters at these places, and I think that tone is going to be quite clear here from Rachel Reeves. Her speech coming up at around midday today, obviously, though, enormously overshadowed all of the events here in this conference by what's happening in Israel and also fluctuations on the bond market. So we'll have to watch all of that as well.
OK, thank you, Ed. Thank you, Mari. Back to both of you later on in the programme. Before that, though, let's bring in Ian, should we? Ian, very keen to know your thoughts on what's happening with Metro Bank. If you've got a mortgage with Metro Bank this morning, should you be worried?
Well, Metro Bank has raised £325 million in new capital this morning, Kay. 150 million of that comes in an equity issue, 100 of which comes from the Colombian billionaire Chaim Gilinski. He's the second richest man in Colombia. He's already a shareholder of Metro Bank, has been since 2019, but he's putting up £102 million or so of the equity being raised, and that will leave him as Metro Bank's largest shareholder with 53%. There's also £175 million worth of debt being issued, and an existing £600 million worth of debt is being refinanced. I can tell you from the share price reaction, the market likes this very much, Kay. The shares are up some 19% so far this morning. Obviously, the new equity was issued at a significant discount. The shares closed on Friday evening at 45p, and the new equity is being issued, to, as I say, most of it to Chaim Gilinski at 30p also, but the shares have popped to 53p. So it looks as though this bank is on a much more even keel right now. There are still issues over a mortgage book. A portion of the mortgage book is going to be sold, and there are various buyers, apparently, we're told, in the offing, including potentially Santander, Lloyds Banking Group and NatWest.
And just while I've got you, I believe the oil price is going through the roof as well, given what's happening in the Middle East.
Not really, Kay. It popped earlier on. As we speak, the oil price is up $2.80 a barrel, which is about 3% on the session. It really takes the oil price. But the oil price had a pretty torrid week last week, fell by getting on for 10% on the week. We're back to where we were last Wednesday afternoon. It's not really that dramatic a move, if I'm honest.
That's me told. OK, Ian, for now, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Looking at some of the other stories making headlines for you this morning. Schools have shut and flights have been grounded in Hong Kong as the remnants, of Typhoon Koinu brought heavy rain and strong gales. The storm left hundreds of passengers stranded at the airport and underground metro stations overnight. The typhoon has weakened into a tropical storm, but many areas were still inundated with water just a month after the city was hit with record-breaking rainfall. And floods brought havoc to Scotland over the weekend, causing disruption to both road and rail network. Parts of the country saw 1 month's rain in 24 hours and severe flood warnings, including a risk to life, which remains in place in some areas. The flooding has been compared to the infamous Beast from the East storm, while other parts of the UK enjoyed the warmest start to October for 5 years. More than 2,400 people have died in an earthquake in western Afghanistan, according to the country's ruling Taliban. The magnitude 6.3 quake struck at lunchtime on Saturday, followed by a series of strong aftershocks. Hundreds are still feared to be trapped in the rubble as rescue workers and survivors dig around the clock to reach them. Strikes again in Whitehall. Ivor's here with us. Tell me more.
Yeah, so more strikes, this time inside government departments themselves. Cleaners, security guards and support staff are going to be walking out all week from today at 3 departments. They are the Department for Energy, the Department for Business and the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. The dispute is all about pay. It's the second time they've done this week-long walkout. They've been offered a 2.2% pay rise by their employer. Their union, the PCS union, says, well, look, compared to inflation, that's absolutely peanuts. Let's just hear what their national president said, Fran Heathcote. She spoke to you a little earlier.
She did.
Well, our members provide cooking, cleaning and security services to some of the richest businessmen in the world. And At the same time, they're employed by ISS and have a payoff of 2.2%, whilst the inflation's running at 6.8%. Clearly, they also work alongside people who are looking at much bigger increases. Many of them are very low-paid members anyway. Many of them work 2 or 3 jobs just to get by. And this is really a dispute to try and get them a reasonable pay increase.
So whilst that's going on all week, also today you've got security guards at the House of Commons who'll be voting whether or not to strike. And if they do, it'll mean restricted access to Parliament, long queues to get inside for everyone who works there, including, of course, MPs.
Indeed. So for now, thanks very much indeed. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Next couple of days, mostly very warm. Scotland will turn mainly dry for a time, but there'll be more rain there tomorrow. Mostly mild now, but it's rather murky for much of the north and near coasts in the west, while central Britain has some patchy rain, some inland fog in the south as well.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up, going to be live in Jerusalem with the latest on the escalating conflict between Israel and Hamas.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent. From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
The 5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Again, everybody, you're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News Monday morning. We'll be bringing the latest from Liverpool, where the Labour Party conference is underway. Don't forget, of course, that the Shadow Chancellor will be making her speech at midday today. So more on that. Also, let's tell you more about Israel's Defense Force. They've told Sky News they thought they'd be in a better place than they are in the battle against Hamas. At least 700 Israelis have been killed, more than 400 Palestinians since Hamas launched attacks on Israel on Saturday. Still pockets of resistance, we're being told, on Israeli territory. Day 2 of the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, which will be focusing on reviving the economy. Rachel Reeves branded the Tories as the single biggest obstacle to the economy. And strikes, cleaners, security guards and support staff in 3 Whitehall departments are starting a 5-day strike today, demanding an increase in pay.
Yes, good morning again from Jerusalem. More than 100 people have been taken hostage by Hamas. That's according to a senior official of the militant group, and more people remain missing. These are the faces of just some of those. Their families have posted their pictures on social media, desperately seeking information. Their shared fear, of course, is that they are dead, or, as is becoming increasingly clear, they've been taken hostage by Hamas. Among them is Noa Argamani, 25 years old. She was among hundreds of people dancing the night away at a music festival just hours before Hamas attacked. And this is the moment when Noa is kidnapped, manhandled onto a motorbike and then driven across the desert. A friend of Noa confirmed to Sky News that it is her on the bike. Arms outstretched, she begged her captors not to kill her. Later, a video was released appearing to show her sat on her own drinking some water. Of course, we don't know exactly where that is. Her father spoke to the media.
What can I say? All my life, since she was born, I tried to protect her and hug her and support her and love her. And here, at this difficult moment, at least cheer her up. I couldn't offer her a hand.
British national Jake Marlowe was working at the festival as a security guard.
We haven't heard from him since about early morning yesterday. What I understand is that there were rockets that fired over that party, and they were in attempts to try and evacuate party-goers from the venue.
Well, I'm joined now by Noor Oder, a political analyst and former spokesperson for the Palestinian Authority. Good morning. Thank you very much for being with us. And first of all, do you condemn this terror attack by Hamas?
Well, I'm not sure why we should be spending time instead of putting context, asking me about my opinion. I'm here as an analyst and I don't represent anybody, Mark. I don't think this is the relevant question. We seem to be obsessed with asking the same questions, with talking about the same things, with demanding some sort of line to be drawn between good guys and bad guys. And you should know better. You should know that the story is far more complex and nuanced than that.
Well, it is possible to have a human reaction to these things.
Of course,
and
I
just wondered what yours was.
Viewers time to give them context rather than my opinion, which naturally would be that I can't tolerate to see any civilian put in a situation of danger, and unfortunately, this is commonplace in a country that has been under occupation and brutal oppression for over half a century. It doesn't always make the news on your screen, but it's an everyday reality for Palestinians.
Well, it quite often does make the news on our screen. But the reason I'm asking, Noor, is that you are an analyst and you know about these things. And I just wondered what you thought was achieved by, murdering women and children, by massacring people at a music festival and taking these hostages. I wonder, what is Hamas seeking to achieve by that?
Well, let me start from the beginning, which is that for months, and even here on Sky News, experts and observers like me have warned the situation is reaching a breaking point. Israel is killing a record number of Palestinian civilians. It is imprisoning a record number of Palestinians, demolishing a record number of Palestinian homes. There is absolutely no horizon. You have a right-wing government that has stated its goal as decimating hope for Palestinian statehood. So that end reality brought us to where we are now, where diplomatic efforts are labeled as diplomatic terrorism, where academics who speak out are labeled as anti-Semitic, where any mobilization in civil spaces for justice, for Palestinian rights is also labeled and maligned. There were no avenues. And it was an opportunity for groups like Hamas and others who see no other option but armed action to take center stage. That failure to create a horizon is exactly what brought us all to this very tragic point where everybody is suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. And clearly, Palestinians have legitimate grievances. My point is really, what does a terror attack like this do to help the Palestinians?
Well, again, it is not about that one attack. It's about a dead-end situation that, we're with no options for a breakthrough, with no options for an end to the occupation, with no options for an end to the siege of 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, whose majority are under 35 years of age. A 20-year-old in Gaza has already survived 5 wars. So one of them at least lasted for 51 days. In every one of them, hundreds of children were killed. Entire families were wiped out, just as they are being right now in Gaza. So the answer really for me, has to do with changing the mantra and changing the way we deal with this. This is not about good guys versus bad guys. It's not about whether you allow Israel, which is accused of documented war crimes, to commit even more war crimes in order to maintain its stranglehold and control over the Palestinians. It's about ending this once and for all, about giving Palestinians their right to be free from this cycle, free from being beholden to a dynamic of violence and brutality, both ways.
Okay. Noor, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. And joining us for more is our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, who is in the Lebanese capital of Beirut. And the regional dimension to all this is crucial, Alex. And of course, the fears that the Hezbollah group may enter this fight.
Yeah, it is a very complicating situation to a crisis which is already deepening, Mark. What's going on in Gaza looks as though it's going to get much worse. It almost certainly seems as though the Israelis are going to launch a ground incursion, but what could happen up here on the northern border would make that much worse indeed. Now, when we listen to what Hezbollah are saying, they are saying that their rockets and missiles are with Hamas. The two groups are aligned. Both of them are sponsored by Iran, and both of them, by much of the Western world, are deemed as terrorist organizations. Now, Hezbollah and Israel have fought a war before in 2006, so we have an idea of just how destructive that could be. And we've also seen some signaling from Hezbollah that they will be prepared to join in. Yesterday, they fired at an Israeli radar station. Now, what did fall within what you would understand, or the Israelis would understand, as the rules of engagement. It was in a contested zone. They didn't fire at cities in the north, but it is a very worrying sign. It's a sign, really, that Hezbollah are signaling that they are here and they are prepared to join in the fray if they deem things as to going too far.
OK, Alex, thank you very much indeed. We'll have more from here in Jerusalem in the coming hours, but let's go back to Kay now in London.
OK, Mark, thank you. Still to come, we're going to get the very latest on the escalating conflict between Israel and Hamas. And also, we will be speaking to the Chief Rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregation of the Commonwealth.
My grandfather, Frank Murphy, he was in the 100th Bomb Group, part of the 8th Air Force during World War II, and he flew 21 missions over Nazi-occupied Europe. And actually, on Tuesday is the 80th anniversary of when he was shot down over Munster. And he was a prisoner of war for 18 months in Stalag Luft III, where the Great Escape took place. And in the 1990s, he decided, was from Atlanta, Georgia, and after retirement, he had worked for Lockheed Martin, and he worked with airplanes his entire life and was in Saudi Arabia and all these. He had this very interesting life he also writes about in the book. But he decided to take pen to paper and write this for the family, for his 7 grandchildren, for his 4 children. And he wrote this book in retirement, never expecting it to be published on a wide scale. It's been like over a decade in the making, this TV series. What they did see was Don Miller. He's a famous historian, his book, Masters of the Air. And so they optioned Masters of the Air. And Don knew my grandfather, and he interviewed my grandfather for his book. And so my grandfather, Frank Murphy, was mentioned in Masters of the Air, and Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg decided that they wanted to tell the stories of the 100th Bomb Group, known as the Bloody 100th. And so my grandfather was a navigator in the 100th, and so they feature these guys, and Austin Butler's in the series, and Rafferty Law, Jude Law's son, and all of these incredible actors. These were just boys. They were barely 18, 19 years old, and here they are with no flying experience, going up in these unpressurized, massive bombers. My grandfather flew 21 missions. He almost made it to 25. And on that 21st mission, he gets shot down over Munster, Germany. He has this incredible story in the book about how he's parachuting out of his aircraft that's on fire, and he had been injured in the shoulder, and 2 of the men on his aircraft died that day. So it goes back to the title of Luck of the Draw. He says in the book, you either had your name on a bullet or you didn't, and it simply came down to luck.
A bloody and devastating weekend. With us now is the Chief Rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the Commonwealth. That's Sir Ephraim Mervis, of course. Hello, Sir Ephraim. Thank you for joining us. Your reaction?
We've just emerged from a 2-day festival called Simchat Torah. It's a season of rejoicing. It's supposed to be one of the happiest times of the year, but it was transformed for us into days of mourning, deep grief and trauma. And I, like many others, emerged from our festival last night. Like many others, haven't slept much. This is an absolutely horrific time.
How could this have happened?
Oh, that is certainly on many people's minds, and I'm sure that people will try to work it out in the course of the future. But right now, Israel is at war. The first question that we are asking others when giving them a call here in the UK is, how's everyone in your family? Because there certainly isn't a Jewish family in the UK which hasn't been affected in one way or another by this. And also, I've been inundated with so many messages of support and solidarity from so many people throughout Britain. And I sense that, there is no civilized person who can be unmoved, deeply shocked, who can't be deeply shocked by these scenes, by seeing what has transpired. And I know that there are many, many people who are with those suffering in Israel right now.
How can Palestinians and Jews alike reconcile what's happened with their faith?
With their faith?
Yeah.
Well, you know, Jewish people have been people of faith from the time that we have been around, and we have gone through so many traumas. And despite so many numerous attempts to annihilate us, we are here and we exist in strength, and thank God we have a Jewish country, Israel, a tiny country the size of Wales, which has just gone through, you know, no comparison is perfect, but in terms of scale, Israel has just experienced its 9/11. In terms of shock, Israel has just experienced its Pearl Harbor. And we are praying. You know, there have been many special prayer services. The United Synagogue is hosting a large service this evening in northwest London. There will be a major vigil in central London today, together with many other services. And we pray at this time, and we give charity, and we show our solidarity.
As a man of God, can you pray for the Palestinian civilians trapped in Gaza?
So the loss of all innocent life, the suffering of all innocent people is a tragedy, and our hearts go out to everyone, wherever they might be. Israel, at this very moment, is fighting a war. There have been horrific scenes of terrorists going from house to house, dragging sometimes whole families out, taking hostages, parading them in the streets. There's been a music festival just outside Kibbutz Re'im. It's Israel's equivalent of Glastonbury. And 260 teenagers murdered in cold blood. And
that number may go even higher, of course.
Yes, that absolutely. And you know, in some media outlets, they're not using the term terrorist for those who are committing these atrocities. And
you know, Hamas is a terrorist organisation as far as the British government is concerned.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, if one doesn't use the term terrorist, it's as if one is providing a window of opportunity for justification, and nothing can justify this. You can imagine if, God forbid a million times, terrorists attacked Glastonbury and murdered 260 teenagers there, what would the British public say about anyone in the media who wouldn't call the perpetrators terrorists?
I hear you, but it is a tragedy for all civilians, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
What happens next?
Oh gosh, we pray to God that Israel will be able to fight this war successfully. Israel is striving to protect her citizens. That is her responsibility. The atrocities continue, the trauma continues, the hostages are in Gaza, and we are identifying strongly with enormous pain with those who are suffering.
We appreciate you taking the time to join us. I'm really very sorry for your loss. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Reverend. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, Sir David Manning is joining us now, former British ambassador to the USA and also to Israel. Hello to you, Sir David. The first responsibility of any country, of any government, is to protect its civilians from harm. What went wrong?
Very hard to know what went wrong. It's an extraordinary event. Clearly, there's been a huge intelligence failure. I'm sure there will be a long inquiry and a deep inquiry into what happened, particularly since, on the whole, Israeli intelligence services are extremely competent. But no intelligence service is perfect. Israel was caught out once before, almost exactly 50 years ago in the Yom Kippur War. And I think they will have to look very hard at whether their reliance on, as it were, technical intelligence, which clearly Hamas managed to work round, was too great, and that their reliance on human intelligence needs to be greater in future. But I'm speculating. I don't know, and we will have to see what happened.
Sure. But, Sir David, one wonders about the motivation for Hamas. They will now feel, once the shock has subsided, they will feel the iron fist of Israel.
They will, but in some ways I fear that's what they want. I think they're trying to establish themselves as the only viable voice of the Palestinians. I think they've been disturbed by the possibility that Israel might do a deal with Saudi Arabia in return for Saudi recognition. There might have been concessions to the Palestinian Authority on the West Bank, and the Hamas terrorists are deeply opposed to the Palestinian Authority. And so I think that what they're trying to do is capture the sense of frustration and anger among young Palestinians and make sure it's focused on Hamas as the expression, if you like, of resistance to Israel. And so I don't think they mind having created this dreadful situation, because in a sense it's captured the attention that they want and has made them, if you like, the focus for what they would see as Palestinian resistance.
And just a thought before I let you go, the Saudis, the Iranians, the Syrians, keeping an eye on what's happening in Israel. Meantime, countries like the Qataris, desperate to seek some calmness in what could potentially be a powder keg in this area.
I'm sure you're right. It will be the top priority of the Arab world now, I think, to try and find some kind of ceasefire. It's going to be very difficult to negotiate. The Americans have got the same interests as the Europeans. There will be differences of view, but the question is now what happens on the ground in Gaza, and is it possible to contain this violence in Gaza, or is this war going to spread? And it's in nobody's interest that it should spread. And that is what certainly I would expect the Gulf Arabs and the Americans and the Europeans to be working very hard to try to achieve.
OK, we must leave it there for now, but thank you for your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
A very quick look at the weather for you here on Sky News.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Next couple of days will be mostly very warm. Scotland will turn mainly dry for a time. Take your brolly if you're in Scotland.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Very latest from Liverpool and also Israel in just a moment. morning to 9 o'clock, full coverage of the Israel-Hamas war here on The Breakfast Show. Speaking to Palestinians and Israelis, including the spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Force. It's Monday, the 9th of October.
Yeah, good morning, Kay. Fighting between Hamas and Israel forces continues outside Gaza this morning. Israel say they thought they would be in a better place. Lighting up the night sky, Israel launches fresh airstrikes on Gaza overnight in an exchange of fire. More than 400 Palestinians have been killed so far. Sky News reports from the heart of Israeli destruction, with up to 700 killed in Hamas attacks and 260 bodies recovered from a music festival. Hostage fears, we report on the fate of those missing in Israel and feared captured by Hamas fighters.
Thanks, Mark. Also on the programme for you this morning, Breakfast Show, Sky News, the Shadow Chancellor preparing to reveal her plans for the UK economy. I asked her if it was appropriate for the Shadow Foreign Secretary to appear with a Palestinian diplomat after he said Hamas terrorists were coming Israel's way.
I don't know what David's schedule is for conference. I hadn't heard those remarks, but they are totally unacceptable.
Metro Bank secures a deal to shore up its finances, refinancing £600 million of debt. Whitehall walkout cleaners, security guards and support staff at 3 departments go on strike today. And flooding in Scotland causes rail and road chaos. Latest from Liverpool and the Labour Party conference shortly. Very busy show for you today. All the day's top stories coming in just a moment. Before that, though, the latest developments on the Israel-Hamas war. Mark's in Jerusalem, as you saw. Hi, Mark.
Yeah, good morning, Kay. Good morning from Jerusalem. There's fresh fighting this morning between Hamas and Israeli forces outside of Gaza. The Israeli Defense Force has said they thought they would be in a better place by now. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to turn much of Gaza into rubble in revenge for what he described as the Black Day of Hamas attacks on Saturday. Well, these are this morning's key developments. An Israeli military spokesperson has said that while their forces are fighting Hamas gunmen in 7 to 8 places in southern Israel, they thought they would be in a better place. Overnight, Israel has intensified its bombardment of the Gaza Strip, where the Gazan Health Ministry says more than 400 people have been killed. At least 700 people have been reportedly killed in Israel, and about 260 bodies have been removed from a music festival targeted by Hamas in the south of the country. And last night, the US said it would send warships and also fighter jets to support Israel. Well, these are the latest pictures we're getting as Israel continued to hit the Gaza Strip with retaliatory airstrikes overnight. The Gazan Health Ministry tells us 78 children are among 400 killed in the territory so far. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees says a school sheltering more than 225 people took a direct hit. The UN says more than 123,000 people in Gaza have been displaced so far. Some rockets were also fired towards Israel from Gaza overnight. Let's get the latest then from our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who is in southern Israel.
What's most astonishing
is the fact the IDF says they are still fighting Hamas fighters in, as you were saying, 7 or 8 places around the communities around Gaza, and in some of those situations those Hamas fighters are still holding hostages, so it's a complicated operation taking them on. They also say that Hamas is still able to get out of Gaza either by sea or still by land, possibly through the breaches, the many breaches they made in the security fence, and that poses a threat to the people of these communities around Gaza. And we have seen yesterday a group of Hamas militants possibly got in by sea, hijacked a car, and then went through the streets of Ashkelon here and started shooting people. 15 Israelis killed reportedly before they were then killed in turn by Israeli soldiers. So people in cities like Ashkelon, as you can see, are voting with their feet. The shops are shuttered behind me. It feels like a bit of a ghost town here. We're talking to the man who runs the coffee shop here. He was saying on the first morning the bomb shelters in this town were full, and they are now half full. So a lot of people have left.
Well, our chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey reports from the southern city of Sderot, and a warning that his report includes images of the body bags containing victims and the bloodied aftermath of one attack.
Murdered in cold blood on a sunny Saturday morning, the bodies of some of the victims of the Hamas attack have yet to be removed. The blood-splattered cars where they were killed are parked a few feet away. The vehicles pockmarked and broken by the hail of bullets. This was a coordinated attack on the town of Sderot. The road leading to it is lined with vehicles attacked by Hamas as they drove towards the city in this surprise attack. Some escaped on foot, but many were killed or taken hostage and driven to Gaza. Survivors like Isaac hid in their homes, praying the gunmen wouldn't find them. It was simply terrifying, they say.
I was shocked. I heard shooting and couldn't believe it. 6 in the morning on Saturday, on the holiday. It was scary, very scary.
The main police station is destroyed, taken over by the gunmen who killed 20 officers. The scale of what happened here is clearly unfathomable for the people of Israel. Nobody ever thought this was remotely possible. In the end, the defense forces destroyed the station. In many ways, it's a symbol of a security system that simply failed.
Even when we as the IDF, one person is killed, we take it as a personal loss and a personal responsibility. Here, where hundreds of people have been killed, we will do the most thorough analysis ever done. We'll learn our lessons. We'll make sure that never happens again. But that's going to be for tomorrow. Today, we have to do everything to protect our civilians, restore peace to the people of Israel, and make sure that Hamas never has the capability again to do this kind of carnage to the people of Israel.
The roads heading to southern Israel are eerily quiet. The country is scared and has been scarred by this attack. Security is now everywhere. The only cars in any significant numbers are heading north. On board families moving away from the Gaza borderline with anything they can squeeze in. At a petrol station, we came across SWAT teams. They're here to retrieve hostages taken by Hamas and still inside Israel. Amongst them are negotiators. But this is an ongoing war, and you're never far from it.
Well, there's jets in the air, and that's the sound of the Iron Dome, the Israeli defense system. Soldiers putting on their helmets. You're never quite sure what's happening at any given time out here. The dome is protecting Israel, but it's still unnerving. Say the jets are above us as well, so it's very much an active battlefield in many ways. And the police and the SWAT teams are here because further along the road are where it's believed hostages are still being held.
The defence forces are still securing the Gaza border, but there is already a huge build-up of soldiers and hardware. An Israeli incursion is coming, and it will be bloody. The government is in no mood for mercy, and that will inevitably cost the lives of civilians. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Southern Israel.
Well, more than 100 people have been taken hostage by Hamas. That's according to a senior official of that group. And more people remain missing. These are just some of the faces of those people. Their families have posted their pictures on social media, desperately seeking information about what has happened to them. Their shared fear, of course, is that they are dead, or, as is becoming increasingly clear, they have been taken hostage by Hamas. Now, among them is Noa Argamani, 25 years old. She was among hundreds of people dancing the night away at a music festival just hours before Hamas attacked. This is the moment when Noa is kidnapped. Manhandled on a motorbike and driven across the desert. A friend of Noa confirmed to Sky News that it is her on the bike. Arms outstretched, she begged her captors not to kill her. Later, a video was released appearing to show her sat on her own, drinking some water. We do not, of course, know exactly where that is. Her father spoke to the media.
What can I say? All my life, since she was born, I tried to protect her and hug her and support her and love her. And here, at this difficult moment, at least cheer her up. I couldn't offer her a hand.
A British national, Jake Marlowe, was working at the festival as a security guard.
We haven't heard from him since about early morning yesterday. What I understand is that there were rockets that fired over that party, and they were in attempts to try and evacuate party-goers from the venue.
And by the way, I'll be bringing you this programme a little later, Israel-Hamas War, a special programme live from here in Jerusalem. That's at 9 o'clock, excuse me, at 9 o'clock tonight, UK time, here on Sky News. I will be back from Jerusalem in the coming hours, but now back to Kay in London.
OK, Mark, thank you very much indeed. Thanks. Let's tell you what's happening in Liverpool. It's the Labour Party conference at the moment, and earlier we were chatting to the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. I asked her whether it was appropriate for the Palestinian ambassador to the UK to appear alongside the Shadow Foreign Secretary at that conference, saying that the attack on Israel had been coming.
I don't know what David's schedule is for conference. I hadn't heard those remarks, but they are totally unacceptable, and we disagree with them entirely.
Would you implore David not to share a stage with him?
Look, I don't know what David's schedule is. I don't know whether this man is at our conference, but David has been very clear and unequivocal about Labour's support for Israel, for the people of Israel, their right to defend themselves, their right to protect civilians, the right to get hostages back. We've been absolutely categorical about that.
Well, Mari and also Ed standing by for us this morning. Mari, to you, first of all, to deal with the political side of things. What did you make of what the Shadow Chancellor had to say? Speech at midday, of course.
Yes, speech at midday, and everybody in this conference centre will be waiting to hear what she says. But interestingly, Kay, when you were asking her about that potential appearance of Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy alongside the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, who said on Sky News that the attacks from Hamas on Israel had been coming, and whether David Lammy was still very much going to be standing on a platform with the ambassador at a conference event. She couldn't confirm whether that was going to go ahead or not. And I think the longer the ambiguity around whether David Lammy is going to be appearing with that ambassador or not will potentially start to create a bit of a vacuum, a bit of a space for doubt about Labour's 100% unequivocal backing of Israel. So I think the danger for the Labour Party right now is making sure that they show that they are not wavering at all in any way when it comes to support for Israel and condemnation of Hamas. But also, what really, really matters is over the next few days, will we see any dissenting voices? Will we see any potentially more hard left Corbynista type MPs at this conference sticking their head above the parapet and starting to make waves, and difficult waves, for Keir Starmer? If they do, we could all start seeing the party unity starting slowly to fray. So I think party discipline on the Hamas attacks on Israel will be a huge kind of massive talking point, and we want to watch for this party conference in Labour in Liverpool.
OK, thank you. Ed also standing by, as I said. Rachel Reeves very keen to have us believe that the economy is safe in Labour's hands. Ed, good morning.
Yeah, morning. That is really the point here. This was always, even before, obviously, the events of the last few days, this was an opportunity, as far as Labour was concerned, to try and show that they were the government in waiting. And that's, I think, the impression that we're expected to get from the speech from the Shadow Chancellor coming up later today, and indeed from Keir Starmer. So Keir Starmer's speech, when he does that tomorrow, it is about laying out part of their plan. What's going to be quite interesting about this, though, is, comparing it to the conference in Manchester, the Conservative Party conference last week. Whereas last week, a lot of it was about, to some extent, political chaos, to some extent, the fact that the struggles that Rishi Sunak had to try and bring the narrative back under his control. It was also about cancelling things. It was about cancelling HS2. It was in the shadow of changes to their plans for net zero, so bringing, kind of pushing back the deadline to eliminate petrol cars for sale. Now, here in Liverpool, the Labour plan and the Labour intention is, instead of cancelling things, to try to introduce new plans. And it's kind of interesting that the particular thing that they're focusing on today, and we'll hear more about it from the Shadow Chancellor, it is about changing planning rules so it's easier to build the big kind of infrastructure that the UK will need to get to net zero. It is about potentially bringing that 2035 deadline, which it now is, back to 2030 as well. It is about growth, and that is the interesting thing, is we are hearing more from the Labour Party about their plans to be proactive with the economy, some would say, than we heard from the Conservative Party last week, whereas that was all about retrenching. This time here in Liverpool, the Labour Party are saying what they want to do to build the economy. Now, obviously, it's against the backdrop of what's happening in Gaza and Israel. It's against the backdrop of actually some pretty torrid times in the bond markets as well. So there's lots of noises off here, understandably. But the impression that Rachel Reeves will want to give is, no matter what those noises off, that we are the safer pair of hands. And obviously, you will be able to judge for yourself whether you believe that. But it will be interesting to watch that speech coming up at 12 o'clock. Interesting, too, to see who introduces her. Around this conference hall at the moment, so many businesses from around the country, lobby groups as well, everyone is here. It's more bustling, actually, than the Conservative Party conference, because a lot of people see that this may well be the government this time next year, and they want a part of it.
OK, Ed and also Mari Fanai, thank you. Just hearing that Virgin Airways are considering their best course of options when it comes to flights to Tel Aviv. We heard from Wizz Air earlier today. They say that they have postponed their flights to Tel Aviv until further notice, given what happened on Saturday morning. Virgin say they are considering their options right now. We'll get more on that, of course. If you are planning to make that journey, I think the best thing to do is to check before you leave home. Meantime, talking about homes, Metro Bank has agreed to a rescue deal with investors to shore up its finances. What does that mean if you've got a mortgage with them? Ian standing by. Hi, Ian, tell us more.
Hello, Kay. Yes, that's right. Metro Bank, which, as we've been reporting for the last week or so, has been trying to raise new capital. It's done that over the course of the weekend, some £325 million. Some £150 million of that is via an issue of new shares. And there's also been a debt issue of £175 million. In addition to that, Metro Bank has refinanced some of its borrowings, some £600 million worth of that. The downside for that is that it will be paying a fairly eye-watering rate of interest, between 12 and 14% on some portions of that debt. In terms of the equity raise, well, interestingly, Colombia's second richest man, a billionaire investor known as Jaime Gillespie, he has raised his stake in Metro Bank. He's put up £102 million of the 150 that I mentioned a moment or so ago. He's already a shareholder in Metro Bank. He previously owned about 9%. Well, he now emerges as the biggest single shareholder with a 53% shareholding. So definitely good news as far as the market is concerned. The new shares, I should say, Kay, were issued at 30 pence each. Big discount to the closing price on Friday of 45p. Well, I can tell you just a few moments ago, Metro Bank shares have risen to 56p, up 23% on the day. So big move there. Market likes it.
OK, for now, we'll see you at 11:30. Thanks so much indeed, Ian. Thanks, Ian. The warm-up act for Rachel Reeves, who we'll be hearing from at 12. Ian's show, 11:30 today. I'm just hearing the latest from the Reuters news agency. And that is that, bear with me, I can tell you that the Israeli military saying it's re-established control of communities on the Gaza periphery. However, they go on to say that there are still pockets of resistance from Hamas fighters. More on that in just a few moments' time.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent. From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
The 5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
What's going to happen next in Israel and indeed in the whole of the region? So Simon Mail, former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff, been with us all morning. Hello again. And Lord Peter Ricketts, former Permanent Under-Secretary of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Gentlemen, let me ask you, Lord Ricketts, first of all, who can Hamas rely on?
Well, they are on their own, I think, at the moment. They have had a lot of support from Iran. I don't think Iran was behind this. Indeed, US Secretary of State Blinken has said there's no evidence of that, but they've supplied them with equipment and training. But right now, I think they're on their own, which is where they want to be. They are, as they see it, the flag bearers of the Palestinian cause now.
How long will they be on their own for?
Well, there's plenty of people who are sympathetic to them. Equally, there are a lot of people who conflate support for Hamas with support for the Palestinians. And they, you know, the Palestinian cause is very deeply split. And the fact that Hamas, as a Sunni militant terrorist organisation aligned with Iran, of course, makes it difficult. But I think, as Lord Ricketts said, the scale and the type of the atrocities committed make it very difficult for anybody to pile in behind. And everybody will be conscious that both the Israelis and the Israelis' allies will be looking very carefully at who comes out publicly in support or aids this.
How surprised are you, my lord, shocked perhaps even, that this could have happened 50 years after the start of the Yom Kippur War?
Yes, I mean, very shocked. This is a deeply traumatic event for Israel. A small country, 700 people killed. You know, it's an unbelievable catastrophe for them. And it will have implications in all directions.
Well, they invest a significant amount of money, not only in their armoury and their soldiers, etc., but also in their security and their defence. What happened?
Yes, they have a renowned intelligence service and a very powerful military in the Iron Dome to catch missiles. They thought they were securing their own people. That's what they told their own people. And the invincibility of the Israeli armed forces was part of their brand in the Middle East. And this has been a profound shock for all of that. How did it happen? Well, there'll be a reckoning, there'll be an inquiry, I'm sure. Somehow they missed the signs of a major operation being planned in Gaza involving large numbers of people, large numbers of equipment. And there will be a lot of repercussions from that.
Yeah, well, as you said earlier, Kay, it's a shock, and we will all suffer the consequences of this failure of intelligence. I mean, you know, the Israeli intelligence is always backed up by American intelligence, so there's a collective failure here. At the moment, of course, they're going to deal with the tactical and operational implications. But as Lord Ricketts says, there will have to be a reckoning on how the intelligence failed so badly.
I'm intrigued, Lord Ricketts, about the hostages and what they could possibly plan to do as far as that's concerned. We have seen hostages taken, primarily Israeli soldiers, in the past that have eventually been used to barter and been returned to Israel. But this time they've got more than 100.
Yeah.
They can't hide them in Gaza, one would think, for any significant amount of time. They are using them on an emotional level for now. Where do you see that going?
Well, this is part of what they've done, which has surprised everyone so much, the scale of hostage-taking, as well as the scale and brutality of the civilian casualties. And I suppose they see two things. First of all, it complicates the Israeli problem with a ground invasion. No doubt we will see a ground invasion by the Israeli armed forces, but to free hostages in that situation is very difficult. They'll no doubt use them as human shields. That will make things very much more difficult in public opinion in Israel. Secondly, potentially as bargaining chips against return of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. If they could pull that off, it would be another sign that they were now the dominant Palestinian organisation and had put the Palestinian Authority, you know, right back at the very beginning. But the big question here is what happens in Gaza after an Israeli ground invasion? I mean, who is going to govern Gaza? Presumably this pattern where Hamas are bottled up in Gaza, every few years Israel mounts a war against them to try and buy a certain amount of reduction of violence. That model is broken. But I don't see, if Hamas aren't going to rule them, the Palestinian Authority don't have the authority to, the international community, the UN can't do it, where is the authority going to come from in Gaza to keep Israel safe in the future?
Well, interestingly, because Hamas, to an extent, sold themselves as attacking the Israeli state or the Israeli security apparatus or the Israeli Defense Force. But the attack on this rave, and one imagines many of the young Israelis at the Supernova were actually supporters of a peace settlement in the Middle East, and they gloating on YouTube. And often when they took people like Gilead, the young Israeli Defense Force soldier back in 2006, it was 5 years, they treated him quite well. But one gets the impression that, you know, over the years, opinions have hardened. But I feel Hamas's treatment of just gunning down civilians, murdering them, the sort of images that are coming out, let alone the treatment now of hostages, is really, again, going to really push them more in the direction of the sort of behaviour we expected from Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Jabhat al-Nusra, the very, very hardline fundamentalist terrorists that have been thrown up by the jihadis.
What next?
Well, what next indeed? What next in Gaza? What next on Israel-Palestine policy? I think we all have to face the fact that the international community let this issue slip right off the agenda. Which government has been trying to work for peace between Israel and Palestine in the last decade? The Americans have been very focused on this issue of Israeli peace settlements with other Arab nations, the Abraham Accords with the UAE and Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan. Joe Biden's piece of the action was to try and land an Israel-Saudi peace deal. That now looks like a very long-term prospect indeed. Saudi has been pretty negative towards Israel's responsibility for this. So there's a problem there, and there's a problem for Netanyahu. I mean, we will see what Israeli politics decides on that, but his policy of pursuing aggressive settlement policy in the West Bank, talking of annexation, which would completely end any possibility of a Palestinian state, all that leaves the Palestinians feeling desperate. And what we've seen here, completely unacceptable, of course, by Hamas, is partly tapping into a deep sense of desperation in the Palestinian community. And Netanyahu is doing nothing to give Palestinians any sense of what their future is.
Well, the politicians, if you can call Hamas that debate, we see bloodshed on a grand scale. Israel saying they haven't seen anything like this since 9/11.
And there is a worry, of course. Israel has a very stretched strategic problem. There is worries in northern Israel, of course, on the border with Hezbollah, heavily supported by Iran. There is an issue about what the reaction might happen in the West Bank, where there are another sort of 2 million Palestinians. So the wider regional ripples will really begin to sort of involve a lot of players. We've still got a civil war in Syria, issues to do with Syria. The interesting thing, of course, is where people like Saudi Arabia or Egypt in particular, who, of course, also share a border with Gaza, are going to fall down. So where the voices of moderation come, because unfortunately people now have to play out the collective response to these as we've seen before. But the scale, of course, is much higher than it's been in a number of Gaza, Palestinian, Israeli conflicts and confrontations in the last decade.
Gentlemen, we must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. And thank you. Of course, we've heard from the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, talking about Hamas, describing it as a terrorist organisation, and the British government offering their support to the Israeli people with the Israeli flag projected onto number 10 last night. What is going to happen next? The weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Next couple of days will be mostly very warm. Scotland will turn mainly dry for a time, but there'll be more rain there tomorrow. Mostly mild now, but it's rather murky for much of the north and near coasts in the west, while central Britain has some patchy rain, some inland fog in the south as well.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come on the programme for you, Israel's Defence Force admitting there are still pockets of resistance from Hamas fighters in the south of the country. Mark will have more. Hello again. You are watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Mark standing by for us in Jerusalem today. And Mark, the death toll in the region there continuing to rise this morning.
Yeah, truly horrific figures, Kay. And to shed more light on what is going on in southern Israel, I'm joined by Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht, the international spokesperson for the Israel Defence Force. Thank you very much for being with us. And I wonder if I could just begin by asking you about reports that there are still Hamas gunmen at large in southern Israel as we speak. Is that true?
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having us on, and Kate. So there's actually been a little shift. We had, about 2 or 3 hours ago, we had 8 open areas where there was still quite robust fighting going on. I think we've actually managed to gain control right now. Hopefully, it was supposed to happen yesterday. We've gained control. We can't deny that there's terrorists still inside Israel. There's still small pockets of exchange. But in general right now, we've more or less gained control of the communities. So right as we speak, we just got updated. Again, there's still small pockets of exchange. Our special forces are engaging, but in the end, in general right now, all these locations, and there was multiple communities packed with hundreds of terrorists, we've more or less managed to stabilize. And we're now organizing the arena.
But are Israelis still being killed in southern Israel?
So again, I can get back to you on that, Mark. There's right now we've managed to stabilize it. Again, there's firefights. There's still a certain level of fog, but we are focused now in taking care of the terrorists. So it was important for me to come on and say that we've more or less stabilized the control in all the communities around Gaza. There's 2 last small pockets of people fighting. I don't know if there's people that have got shot or killed. It could happen. I mean, we have dozens, hundreds of Israelis, civilians and soldiers killed. So the scope of this is an epic scale.
Let me ask you this then. Are all hostages inside Gaza, or are there, to your knowledge, hostages being held by Hamas gunmen inside southern Israel?
So before I came on, there was a one hostage situation inside one of the kibbutzim, Kfar Aza. I'm sure hopefully it will be solved in the upcoming hours. Again, there could be more terrorists in Israel. They came in the hundreds, but right now I think that's more or less as much as I can tell you with an update what's going on right now in the field. We're now focusing on securing the border.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. And on the issue of securing the border, to your knowledge, have more Hamas gunmen come across that border in the last few hours? Have they continued to come across the border?
So we've secured most of the breaching points. There could be a potential for them to come through. There's areas where we're securing a small amount of breach points with ground vehicles and air coverage. They could have come through. We are still looking at other options for them to infiltrate into Israel. We can't deny that. I'm seeing things on the media about tunnels. We're trying to make sure that, again, our border is secured, also on the ground and also in the sea.
Right, Colonel, we're 48 hours into this, after this attack. You can't be happy with how it's gone. You cannot be happy as the most powerful military in the Middle East that there are still Hamas gunmen at loose in southern Israel.
Mark, yeah, we're not happy in general. We have hundreds of civilians that have been kidnapped into Gaza in a barbaric act. Again, I have some people here that told me this morning that's the largest number of Israelis, Jews killed in one day since the Holocaust. I mean, the scope of this is something different. It was a surprise attack. And again, failures or what we're not happy about, we're going to sit down and learn what happened here. There's going to be books about this, Mark. But right now, we're focused on gaining back control.
But what would you be saying now to those who say it is the Defence Force's job to defend civilians? What would you say to those people? What would you say to the families of those who have died or been kidnapped?
We're not a regular army, Mark. This is the People's Army. We're not a deployable army. This is the army of the people. We have managed to mobilize 300,000 reservists. Everybody's coming to join. Put the reform aside. The army is the people, and the people are the army. So there's no difference. We're one entity.
But Israel prides itself on it. But Israel prides itself on its intelligence and its security and its defence. Let me just ask you one final question. The hostage taking, dozens of hostages inside Gaza. How complicated does this make any ground invasion to come?
So I'm not going to talk about our plans right now. I hope that we will bring disruptive solutions to solve this operational scenario. But as you see and you saw last night, right now we are striking in a very severe matter Hamas targets. Sadly, they've entrenched themselves within the population that they've taken captive. The hostage situation is a hard one, Mark. We'll solve it, though.
Yeah. But there are those who have said, and a former Israeli intelligence officer told me yesterday, that any Israeli military action inside Gaza, and there are reports today that you are drafting 300,000 reservists, more than ever before, that any Israeli action in Gaza would be regardless, and he used that word, regardless of there being hostages there.
Well, reservists, they're not official spokespeople for the government or the army. The 300,000 are not only for Gaza, they're also to stabilize some internal issues, mainly Judea and Samaria, and also to ramp up our defenses in the northern arena. We have also a battle group, American battle group, not focused on Gaza, but basically with a message from the American Central Command commander saying, this is showing our support to our brothers. And again, it was important for me just to mention also to the Prime Minister and also the Foreign Secretary, we're very thankful for the support we're getting from the British public and leadership.
Right. And on this point, though, of the hostages in Gaza, how do you feel about there being hostages inside Gaza with Israel, by all accounts, about to launch a major ground invasion?
Are you asking me how I feel personally? I feel worried, concerned. Again, we're here, as I said before, it's the People's Army. A kid that grew up in my house, one of the best friends of my kid, I just got a message from my daughter crying in her base that he was just declared dead. So again, we are ready, we are united, and we're going to do what we need to do to get the IDF back on track.
Isn't the truth that the assault that is now taking place on Gaza, and your Prime Minister has said he wants to reduce many areas to rubble, isn't the truth that Gaza is a crammed, tiny area of 2 million people, and it is simply impossible to avoid civilian casualties on the operation that is underway and about to take place?
Mark, one of the tragedies is that up till last week, we had a paradigm. We had, the Erez crossing, which was a humanitarian crossing, we expanded that crossing for people coming into Israel to work. It looked contained. And what you said about, they started this. If they didn't do this, this wouldn't have started. We have to put that in mind. People in Gaza, we will do everything we can to minimize collateral damage and people that are not involved, very differently from them. We'll notify people if we're attacking an area, but the Hamas have entrenched themselves.
Yeah, but 400 people have already been killed. 400 civilians have already been killed in Gaza, Colonel.
Also 400 terrorists, more than that, have been killed in Gaza. and more terrorists and Hamas people will be killed. All we can do right now is anything we can to minimize, but again, we're going to act severely against Hamas targets.
Is it your aim to eradicate the Hamas leadership in Gaza?
That's a question to the Prime Minister and our political echelon. We're going to do everything we can to degrade their military capabilities. That's all I can say at this stage. I assume this is an ongoing thing where our goal will be defined.
And I just want to ask you about the possible escalation of all this. How concerned are you by Hezbollah, who are based in Lebanon, to the north of Israel, Gaza, of course, to the south? How worried are you about Hezbollah entering this war?
We're concerned. That's why we've ramped up also our defenses in the north, also our offensive capabilities and also our defensive capabilities in the north. We've done some tactical redeployment up there. We are ready for Hamas to come in. I think there's been strong messaging for them to understand that it will be not worth their while to go into this fight. I mentioned before the American capability moving in here. I mean, basically the north is an Iranian front. Hezbollah are an Iranian proxy. I think they will not come into this. Hopefully they won't make that mistake.
What do you think the likelihood is of a wider regional war?
Too early to say. Mohammed Deif called for all the Arabs to join in. That hasn't happened yet. When he made his statement a day ago, that hasn't happened yet. We're seeing little small events, but right now the focus is on the Gaza Strip and readiness in all arenas.
Right, and the focus is on the Gaza Strip, and we know that 48 hours into this, Hamas gunmen are still on the loose in southern Israel. I just wonder, finally, Colonel, do you admit that, I mean, this is an unthinkable thing that has happened in southern Israel. Do you admit that the IDF has failed the people of Israel?
As I said before, the IDF is Israel. The IDF is Israel. We only have one military. We don't have the privilege now to give ourselves points. This nation is determined. We could have done a better job, but we're going to overcome this. Mark, I have to...
Colonel Hecht, I appreciate...
Fight, so it was good talking to you, sir.
Yeah, no, we could bring this to an end. Colonel Hecht, I appreciate you coming on the programme. Thanks very much indeed. So we will have much more from Jerusalem after the break.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent. From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Fly Emirates, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Hello again, everybody. You're very welcome to join us on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Ivor is with us again. These strikes that are taking place just down the road from us this morning.
Yeah, on Whitehall, in fact, inside 3 government departments from today for 5 days, so all this week, there'll be cleaners, security guards and support staff walking out of these 3 government departments, the departments for energy, business and science. And this is the second time they've held a week-long strike in 2 months. The last one was about a month ago in the beginning of September. As you might expect, it's all about pay. They've been offered a rise of 2.2%, which compared to inflation, 6.8%, is nothing, right? So their union, PCS union, is calling for more from their employer, which is a company called ISS. It's a big facilities management firm, and they want them to get back to the negotiating table. And earlier, of course, you spoke to the PCS's national president, Fran Heathcote, who I think we can hear from now.
Well, our members provide cooking, cleaning and security services to some of the richest businessmen in the world, and at the same time they're employed by ISS and have a payoff of 2.2% whilst the inflation's running at 6.8%. Clearly, they also work alongside people who are looking at much bigger increases. Many of them are very low-paid members anyway. Many of them work 2 or 3 jobs just to get by. And this is really a dispute to try and get them a reasonable pay increase.
So separately to that, today, security guards at the House of Commons will be balloted on whether or not they should hold a strike too in the near future. And if they do decide to walk out, there'll be long queues at Parliament because there'll be restricted access. That means MPs among those having to wait to get inside. So whilst all these industrial disputes carry on rumbling on, it feels like they're getting closer and closer to the heart of government.
OK, for now. Ivor, thanks. A couple of other domestic stories for you. Let me tell you what's been happening in Scotland over the weekend. Floods have brought havoc in Scotland over the weekend, causing disruption to both road and rail networks. Parts of the country saw a month's rain in just 24 hours and severe flood warnings, including risk to life, which remain in place in some areas. The flooding has been compared to the infamous Beast from the East storm, while other parts of the UK enjoyed the warmest start to October for 5 years. Schools are shut and flights have been grounded in Hong Kong as the remnants of Typhoon Koinu brought heavy rain and strong gales. The storm left hundreds of passengers stranded at the airport and underground metro stations overnight. And more than 420,000 jobs in the retail industry have been lost since 2010, sparking fears the high street may be in terminal decline, according to a report. Looking at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Next couple of days, mostly very warm. Scotland will turn mainly dry for a time, but there'll be more rain there tomorrow. Mostly mild now, but it's rather murky for much of the north and near coasts in the west, while central Britain has some patchy rain.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come for you. Wilfred Frost will bring you the latest on the war between Israel and Hamas. The latest death toll has now reached 1,100, and we are being told that that number is likely to increase still further. The IDF, Israel Defense Force, say there are still some holes in the fence between Israel and Gaza.
The 5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.